Sex tech space is currently evaluated at 41.3 billion. In the next 10 years, the predictions are that that will be at 209 billion. What does this say about the human interest in that part of our lives, Dr. Elliot?
It's primary. Our mission here at FirmTech is better sex and better sexual health for everyone, so everyone can enjoy a longer life of lovemaking. And I think that, Heidi, I'm quite a bit older than you. I'm confident that you will enjoy an extra 25 to 30 years of sexual health beyond what people of my generation will enjoy.
Well, I'm hoping so, because it is such a universal problem, isn't it? Like ED, and it's something that isn't spoken about. So how do we address a problem that people aren't willing to speak about, right?
Well, we can change the word for one thing. You think about, ED is shaming. I'm actually at war with the word dysfunction because it doesn't describe what the problem is for most men. Let's look at the female side for a second, if we could, Heidi. Back when I started out in medicine in the 1970s, 1980s, women were still being described as frigid, anorgasmic, hysteric, cold. Feminists came along, as did vibrators. And the feminists came along and said, you can't use these words anymore because people aren't going to talk about this problem. And frankly, it's not even that accurate. But men still get saddled with a very negative word, which is dysfunction. And most men are not dysfunctional. Most men just have a problem, and the problem can be fixed. And that's what we've discovered with using our sexual health technology at FirmTech. It is a huge problem, though. 50% of men by age 50 are described as having ED, and it goes up 10% per decade. At age 30, it's 28% in the United States, and I'm certain it's the same thing in the UK.
So what's the correct way to address it? What's the best term?
We need to come up with, I like to say, disappointment. Here's the problem. The doctors have stupidly grouped together two groups that don't belong together under ED. So there are the men who can't attain an erection, or struggle to attain an erection. And that's, as we say in the United States, that's a dead dick, that's dysfunction, that's a man who needs to see a cardiologist or a urologist and or both in order to figure out why they're not getting enough blood into the penis to get an erection. But the vast majority of men who are described as having ED, they get erections and then they lose it. Their erections fade. Well, that's not dysfunction. Their functioning is a problem that can be addressed and can be sorted out with data. Because right now, unfortunately, erectile dysfunction is not being diagnosed with data. It's being diagnosed by subjective reporting. And doctors often don't even ask the right questions to figure out what the problem is. And it can be sorted with data. And there's a mechanical solution for it. And that's what we've discovered at FirmTech, to our surprise. So one of the mistakes that doctors make, the academic doctors, the ones in the universities who set the standards for healthcare, is they see the sickest people in their practices, and then they project from those people onto the general population. They've made that mistake with blood pressure, with lip proteins, and now with sexual health. I'm sorry, you wanted to ask me a question.
So obviously, quite a few people listening to this will be male, so obviously it's a problem that correlates with this audience. Let's just break it down on, what triggers this little problem, as we'll call it, or, what attributes to someone having what we would call ED, even though it's not a great word.
Sure. Well, let's just for the audience, let's just talk about some of the basic physiology of how erections work. One, you have a pump, the heart is pumping blood. You got to get blood in. So men who have angina, heart attack, significant heart disease, they've got a problem. It's not pumping enough blood. And then the pipes that come out of the heart are the arteries. And they can narrow. They narrow with hypertension, diabetes, atherosclerosis. And if they narrow, then you cannot get, that also is a problem with getting enough blood into the penis. But then you have what the doctors have not thought about, we've documented 100,000 erections at FirmTech. This is the world's largest database of men's sexual health ever. And what we've learned is that the problem for men, most men, is on the venous side of the circulation. And what do we mean by that? So the veins take the blood out of the penis. So you need to have smooth muscle around these veins that squeeze and these veins shut and keep the blood in the penis. So in order to, and that's where most men's problem is. So the doctors, the academic doctors, see these sickest people in their practice, the ones who have angina, the ones who have bad hypertension or diabetes. They're not getting enough blood in. But for the vast majority of men, they are getting the blood in, and the goal is to keep the blood in. And what keeps the blood in is an erection ring, popularly known in the United States, probably in the UK as well, as cock rings. And Heidi, if you told me 4 years ago, Dr. Justin, you're going to be speaking with this woman, Heidi Holland, 4 years from now about the advantage of cock rings for all men, I would have said, no way. I would have said, I would have personalized. I would have said, well, I don't need that. But it's not about need. It's about want. So every man and every woman or man who's involved with a man needs to ask themselves these 5 questions. 1, do you want to rock harder? Obviously, the answer is yes. Do you want to last longer? Obviously, the answer is yes. Do you want to have a more intense orgasm? The answer is yes. Do you want to feel more confident? If you had another drink or you smoked too much pot or you're with someone new and you're anxious, do you want to feel more confident? Of course. And the last question is, do you want your partner to be more confident than you? And the answer is yes. And that's what an erection ring does.
It's interesting that you said, cardiovascular problems probably at the top of the list. We've also got things like diabetes, psychological factors, lifestyle risks, hormonal, medication related. But cardiovascular, that seems to be a very important element when it comes to ED. And it's interesting because women often are seen as the ones who take a little bit longer in the bedroom, and it's their job to look after the sexual health, and they're the one who has to do a lot of the mental load in terms of conditioning the sex to be really good in the relationship, right? And they've of course got the whole contraception thing going on as well. But it's actually probably up to men a little bit to invest into their cardiovascular fitness because, we always have that joke of men don't last a long time in the bedroom. It's just kind of an expectation. But is it just the natural state, or is it the fact that we've conditioned ourselves, whether it's through cardiovascular problems, through porn addiction? Is that what's kind of made the time so short? Because you can meet people who can go for a very long time and you can meet people who go for a very short time. And I can't help but feel that in a negative way, people are conditioning themselves to last for a shorter time.
Well, that's a very big question.
Loaded question, yeah.
So, again, what the research shows is that 10 to 12% of men have cardiac issues. Now, obviously, being in good cardiac condition is important for good sex because, especially for a man, it's really embarrassing, or for a woman, it's really embarrassing after a few thrusts if you run out of breath and you have to stop. So, but that's it. Only about 10 to 12% of men actually have that particular problem that their problems or dysfunction, disappointments, whatever, are due to a cardiac issue. A lot, there's so much else that that enters into it. But when it comes to, the vast majority of men, they're so much depends upon, well, is it a new relationship? Well, then people have confidence issues. They haven't, and that can swing them either way. They can come too quickly. They can not come at all. But when people are in sustained committed relationships, that is not, a cardiac issue is usually not the problem. Then there are other factors that enter into it, and they range from. There could be medications that doctors prescribe. We prescribe antidepressants. Blood pressure medications that impact on men's and women's sexual performance without ever even warning people about the fact that this drug is going to either make you come too quickly or make it harder for you to come. Then there's alcohol, recreational drugs, but there are certain, there are other things that go on in committed relationships. I'm worried about paying the mortgage. Work is distracting me. There's a baby crying in the next room. Oh, there are these chores I've got to take care of, and all these things can lead to what I call the fading erection problem, which men get an erection and then they lose the erection. And as they lose the erection, they try to compensate by coming before they've lost the erection, or they put off, or you might even put off even having sex. And that's where a ring becomes valuable, because once a man attains an erection, the ring then just sustains the erection. Women have vibrators. Let's look. So vibrators have changed the issues for women in many ways. One. They help to make what seemed to be an intractable female problem, anorgasmia or frigidity, and make it relatively easy for women to have a climax. Back when again, back before you were born, I was dating probably back in the late 70s and 1980s, there was actually this concern with vibrator addiction and vibrator
Yeah.
usage. And that's gone away. It's about that, vibrators have now been normalized for women. But and for older women, one of the ways in which they're valuable, and they don't work for men as well, is that they sustain the blood flow. So aside from the pleasure benefits of the vibrations themselves, the vibrations actually stimulate arterial blood flow, help with lubrication and with clitoral engorgement. So that's really valuable. Men don't have that. So one of my goals with FirmTech, building upon our research, is to get men to think differently about erection rings. I don't like calling them cock rings because that makes it sound like some novelty you get from a sex toy store. They're erection rings. They sustain an erection, and any man can prove that to himself tonight. And what is it? Go ahead. Want to ask me a question?
No, I was just thinking, like, I always say you should be trained to use the vibrator and be trained to use without the vibrator, right? You should have both going on. But in terms of the cock ring you're using in your work, can you tell me specifically how the technology stops people from being premature and lasting longer?
First, I'll put it in the female context. Heidi, how many erections did your clitoris have last night?
How many, pardon?
How many erections did your clitoris have last night?
0.
You probably had 4 or 5, but you don't know it. So the problem,
Really?
so we're actually, to jump ahead, we get this later on. We have invented the world's first monitor of clitoral health, and that's going to be revolutionary for women. But getting on the male side, a healthy man has 3 to 4 nocturnal erections per night. Our device counts the number. We've embedded sensors into an erection ring. One overnight, we count the number of nocturnal erections, how long they last, and how hard they are. So with this data, men can establish a baseline of their sexual health, just the way you do if you go to a doctor and get your baseline electrocardiogram, or your baseline liver proteins, or your baseline blood pressure. So it's really important for men, especially for men as they get older, 45, 50 years of age, to get the baseline of their sexual health, so they can then track it, just the way we track other healthcare data. So if a man is having less than 3 or 4 nocturnal erections per night, and he's having less than 70 to 100 minutes of time erect while he's sleeping at night, that man has a problem, and that problem could be due to a cardiovascular problem. It could be a medication problem. So getting your data is really important. But the ring itself can also be worn during sex and measures duration, firmness of erections. And with that information, men can then measure the impact of diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerosis, medications, recreational drugs, alcohol, relationships. Why am I perform better with this woman and not that woman? They can start to sort this out because they'll have comparative data. But the ring itself helps men mechanically. It's not as good as a vibrator, but the ring itself puts pressure over our rings. In order to count the number of nocturnal erections overnight, we have to reinvent the cock ring. Because cock rings are these hard silicone O-rings. They pinch, they're uncomfortable. They never really caught on for men the way vibrators are caught on for women. Because they're uncomfortable, they can't be worn for 20, 30 minutes. Our rings are made out of, because our rings are designed to be worn overnight as well as during sex. Our rings are designed to allow the arterial blood in. So they don't pinch, they're not uncomfortable, and they can be worn for hours. They're made out of a soft elastomer. So one of the advantages of elastomer is that they adapt to us. Silicone makes us adapt to them. So, actually, and the rings also, our rings also have an easy on and off, hook. So our rings will accomplish 2 important things during sex. One, they will keep a man harder longer, even after a man climaxes. We have men using our rings for premature ejaculation because they'll stay hard comfortably for 3 or 4 minutes after they ejaculate. Now, at my age, it's not an issue because I'm married for like 37, almost 38 years now. In successful relationships, the women come first and third. So it's the ring. Why do I like the ring? I like the ring because our rings are also designed to produce a more intense orgasm. We put a little bit of pressure over the urethra to draw out the ejaculatory phase. So my ejaculatory phase with our ring goes from 4 seconds to 7 seconds. Well, that's an incredible orgasm. And my wife says she's glad the kids are out of the house because I'm noisy for the first time. So I just think Men need to open their minds to this. So when we present at like the American Urology Association or the European Society for Sexual Medicine, one of the jokes we have is how do you tell the difference between a gay doctor and a straight doctor with one question? Do you use a cock ring? Gay doctor, they like roll their eyes. Oh my god, like it's like asking a woman to use a vibrator. Oh my god, of course I do. I got to use a cock ring. You got a better one? Straight doctor, almost invariably, I don't need that. They personalize it right away. Well, it's not about need; it's about want. Go ahead.
We've established that, erectile health downstairs there is not just something that is for sexual health, it's something for wider health, which is interesting. And I feel like a lot of people need to take more attention to. But it's interesting. Now we have the cock ring and we know the benefits it could have on sexual relationships and obviously on monitoring your erections and the health correlated to that. I guess the main problem now to overcome is how do we get the cock ring on the men? Because you and I both know that sometimes men can be very proud and have a lot of bravado about this situation. Like, how do we make them feel like actually it's okay?
Yeah, it's it's a problem. Let's go back to one thing just noted before, which is that it's not just about sex. It is about a man's cardiovascular health. Because the reason why I originally got involved in this was that a urology professor at the University of Utah told me that the number of erections that a man has at night is a leading indicator of their cardiovascular health. And that took me aback because I'd never heard about that. But if a man averages 3 to 4 nocturnal erections per night, and that goes down by 50% or more, that man has up to 50% chance of having a heart attack in the next 2 or 3 years. Well, this is a vital sign. And by the way, I think the same thing is going to be true for women.
I think it's so interesting because as well, we all view a sign of our health by our BMI, so like our weight and a few bloods we get done at a doctor's hospital, right? And that's not to say that's important. We should all be keeping an eye on that kind of thing. But there's so many other metrics we can judge our health off. Any good health expert or doctor is not just going to judge you by, just the average panels of health. They're going to look at everything, I would imagine.
Yeah, and what doctors don't do is ask about sexual health. I've never had a doctor ask me about my sexual health. No doctors ever asked my wife about their sexual health. In the United States, in the electronic health record, the big one is called Epic. There are no questions about sexual health. And I know the same thing is true in the UK. We do business. We're working with urologists in the UK. And when you get your general physical, there's no box, the system, the computer doesn't tell you, the doctor, ask these questions about sexual health. So
unless you go into a clinic,
right. Let's go to a specialist. Someone's a specialist. And they should ask. But the key question for men is your problem you can't attain erection, or is it a problem that you can't sustain an erection? They also should be asking, in the United States and the UK, when it comes to prescribing testosterone, the doctors are asked to ask 3 questions. How's your energy? How's your sleep? How's your libido? Well, everyone wants more energy. Everyone wants to sleep better. And what does libido mean? And what does, so when I take care of my patients and ask about libido, the question I ask is, how often do you initiate sex with yourself or with your partner per week? And how often would you like to initiate? And that's then you're quantifying it. You're making libido something that's objective as opposed to hate. I'll put it this way, Heidi. Put me in a room with a man for 30 days. My libido is going to be really, really bad. Put me in a room with you for 30 days. My libido is probably going to be really, really good. So we don't mail me a check for $10,000 right now. My energy and sleep and libido are going to be great, and probably the same thing for you, true. So we want to make things objective. FirmTech is about making sexual health objective.
Well, as well, there's the whole debate about HTR as well, isn't there? Hormone replacement therapy. Because obviously, like, as people do age, the hormones kind of nosedive, don't they, a little bit? And this is why, if we're going to say ED, does kind of trickle more towards mid-age, right? So, it's interesting that we're now moving to a space, especially with FirmTech, with technology that's going to help men. But as I said, I just think the biggest problem that probably anyone in this space that is creating, whether it's male sex toys or enhancers, is just the male ego, because your manhood is directly correlated. I don't believe this, but apparently your manhood is directly correlated with how much of a man you are as well. So it's really hard to almost get people to, move past that, because this is years and years and years and years of thinking, and you have to pick that
Well,
apart, which is so
it's almost
difficult.
genetic. Mentally, a man is only as good as the last two or three erections. So that's just the way we are. So you have to accept that about us. But look, we're all on the road from fitness to dysfunction. I actually trademarked the phrase erectile fitness because we in the United States and the UK as well too, we are a fitness oriented culture. So one of the ways in which we want to persuade men to pay more attention to this is by switching switching the words to some degree from dysfunction to fitness. You want to stay fit. You want to stay fit for a lot. So, but we're on this road, and we don't know where we are. We don't know how fit we are because I'll just focus on nocturnal erections again. A man can only have one nocturnal erection and be on the verge of being impotent and still be able to perform. Ideally, that man would start with a baseline of 4, and then like with blood pressure or any other thing, you see, oh, I got to 3. What's changed in my life or my medications or my habits? Why am I deteriorating? And then he goes to 2. Well, he goes to 2, he should see he should see a doctor. So we're giving people, men and soon women, a dashboard. Where am I on this road? And when we drive a car, we look at our dashboard. We could be driving at I'm in the United States. I live in Montana. I could be driving 120 miles per hour and only have a 1/16th of a tank of gasoline left, and I'm in trouble. But I know that because I can see I have a light on my dashboard. But when it comes to sexual health, we don't know where we are because we don't have data. The data is really, really important. So we're giving men and soon women a dashboard so they can say, here I am on this road. I like where I am. I want to keep going on this road because I like where I am. Or I got a problem about to happen. Or I have a problem. Now I've identified it. Can I reverse this? What steps can I take? Medications, lifestyle, vices, etc. To ideally make a U-turn.
And also, communication is a big part in this conversation, because, using medication, using tools is all well and good, but you do need to address a certain level of commitment psychologically, of maybe going a bit easier on yourself, like letting yourself have an allowance of you're just figuring this out. I know with women, a big thing is orgasms, and you can orgasm sometimes, but sometimes you won't be able to orgasm for a really long time because something psychologically is going wrong with you. And it's up to you to kind of sit down with yourself, say, what can I do? How can I be a bit easier on myself? You can't keep on doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results. That's the definition of insanity. So you need to switch something up, your mental outlook, find what medications and find what, equipment can work for you.
Let's look at it from the male perspective for a moment. So I prescribe PD5 medications, Viagra, Cialis, sildenafil, tadalafil, commonly. Most of the men I prescribe them to are older.
ED.
They're men for ED. Well, for performance enhancement. They're men in the 50s and 60s. I do prescribe it to younger guys, but for them it's a party drug. Guys
This is
know from
Viagra.
talking to Viagra, right, or Cialis. But guys know that, hey, I can have a cocktail or 2 more. I can party. I can do more drugs at a party, basically. And if I take a pill, I won't have, as we say in the United States, whiskey dick. But
Yeah.
Older men, and by older men I mean even guys in their late 20s, late 30s, they can't relax because if they're dating online, they're very concerned about their performance. And most men this like over 50% of men will lose their erection on the first date. They'll get an erection, they'll lose it because of anxiety. So the pills help them, and I got guys who tell me the pills work even if it's just in their wallet because the pill gives them confidence they can do something about their problem. But the ring, if they're just dating someone, the ring works. The pills put more blood in, but they don't keep it there. If the problem for most men is, hey, I'm nervous, I get an erection, then I lose it, the ring will help them. But communication is important too, and I think that women, if men are finally to widely adopt, straight men that is, not gay men, but men are to adopt erection rings as something that's normal, the way vibrators are normalized for women, women are going to have to let them know that it's okay. I'll illustrate this with an anecdote. About a year or so ago, I was in Rotterdam at a European Society for Sexual Medicine conference, and this really tall Dutch urology resident, a woman. I mean, the Dutch can be tall, as you know. She was well over 6 feet, and she was telling about her dating problems, how she can't find men who are taller than her, and men who have of her degree of education, etc. So this woman, she had finally met a man who was taller than her and met her other qualifications, and so I gave her a ring and said, "Look, if things are going well after the hors d'oeuvres or after your entrees, why don't you slide this across the table and tell them you'd like to experiment with this?" And she came back the next day and said it was the best date of her life, because when a man introduces a sex toy into a relationship, it might get used once or twice. When a woman introduces a sex toy into a relationship, it'll get used all the time as long as she wants it to be used.
Yeah.
And my wife's idea of foreplay is red lipstick and give me a ring. I'm a guy. So communication is an interesting problem as well too, though, because I think there are things that people don't want to communicate, and that's really hard. Men don't want to communicate the fact that, hey, I find it hard to get erect or sustain an erection until there's trust in a relationship. That's a really hard conversation for a guy.
I just quickly Googled it, and the average time for actual penetration in sex is actually 5.4 minutes, which to me is shocking.
Yeah, that is pretty shocking. And I was really unaware of this until I got involved in this sector. But from talking to men, a lot of men, about when they lose erections, they don't want to say to their partner that their penetrative sex is not what they're really interested in.
Yeah.
And so for example, I hope this isn't too graphic. I'm going to talk. This is a typical client of FirmTech. Man's in his 50s or 60s. He is in a committed relationship or married, and he finds himself losing his erections. The typical story he tells me is, we go to bed, I get turned on, I go down on my partner because that's how she likes to climax, and then she expects me to penetrate her immediately after, and I've lost half my erection by that point, and I actually need more direct stimulation at that point in order to recover a full erection. Instead, I try to penetrate her and I lose my erection.
I guess this is why people do 69.
Well, that's one reason. But my point is that this guy's problem, this typical problem, is fixed by a ring, because when the man goes down on his partner, he stays hard with less stimulation. It also relieves the pressure in his female partner's mind, because she's not worrying, I got to come quickly because he's going to lose his erection, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think that we're talking the average couple people over the age of 45, 50. I don't think that penetrative sex is the way in which they're coming more than half the time.
Women don't typically, clitoral stimulation is probably how a woman is more likely to ejaculate in sex. But I do wonder how much of that is actually just because we're not listening to each other enough, because a really common thing women feel in the bedroom is that they have to perform for the man and please them, and it's all about their experience. So I just wonder if we're starting to get into that area where we're speaking to each other more, and maybe we might have more penetration based orgasms. But 5.4 minutes, that's, in my personal experience, that's not enough.
It's like having a dessert or a cocktail. Okay, where's the meal?
Yeah, we've not made it to the interval yet.
Well, that's actually where rings are valuable, because rings will both make people more confident and help men.
If we're buying time in the bedroom where we can look at the data and feedback, then obviously we have more time to explore and investigate things, I suppose. Because everyone's different.
Yeah, again, from talking to patients and customers, I don't think that 5 minutes reflects what people are doing. I think that people are really trying to have sex for 20 or 30 minutes, and involves multiple positions, and often often penetrative sex is somewhere in the middle. That's a pathetic number. That's really I'm not shocked by it. I'm not surprised by it.
If we dial it back to people who will be using this ring, which you said it's probably from the 50s to 60s, often, how come men's libido does start to dip at that kind of age or even in their 40s? Is it just kind of what happens over time as you mature and you age? And
Well, I think it starts. I think men actually start deteriorating at a much earlier age, and no one. It's obvious, and no one has investigated. And here's this. So, a guy who's 14. I'm 14 years old. I hold a girl's hand for 5 minutes. I have an erection for an hour. By the time I'm 30, that doesn't happen anymore. So, men's libido, as quantified by how easily aroused they are, it starts to deteriorate relatively early. Then you have the fact, a young man, 13 or 14-year-old, 15, 16-year-old, can masturbate 6, 7, 8 times a day. By the time he's in his
oh my
late 20s
God.
or 30s, he's probably down to maybe 3 or 4 times a day. And by my age, guys are, it's worse. So the interval, the refractory period between climaxes in men deteriorates. It doesn't happen in women, by the way. Women don't have the deterioration refractory period until menopause usually, and then that can be reversed in women with testosterone, which is interesting as well too. So I think that, go ahead.
Excitability is a big factor in it, I guess.
No one knows why this deterioration in men occurs, and no one is paying attention to it. I mean, women like to claim, justifiably so, that when it comes to medical research, they're neglected. Most medical studies, involve men. But when it comes to sexual health research, men get virtually no attention. Men get virtually no attention whatsoever. And women don't get enough, but they get a bit more.
With ED, when you start experiencing a little bit of it, is that a sign or a symptom that you can kind of trust along with other things that you might be having something that is related to heart health or cardiovascular diseases or illnesses? Is it something that's readable as a symptom of actually there's something I might need to check out here?
Well, that's where the data is so valuable, because I'll look at both extremes. I'll pick on someone close to you. A man is 35 or 40 years of age, and the man is starting to have issues of either not getting erection or losing an erection. Well, if a man has access to our data, if that man has only one nocturnal erection, that man has a cardiovascular or urological problem and he needs to see a doctor. If that man has 3+ nocturnal erections per night, the issue is in his head, more likely to be in his head or in his relationship or with alcohol or some other factor. So the data, the wearable, can help men to immediately sort whether the problem is psychogenic or physiological, and that's really valuable.
So are nocturnal erections what we would what we would correlate with a wet dream? I don't know if you'd call that in America.
No. Yeah, we talked about that too. No, a wet dream involves actual ejaculation. So most men by the mid-20s no longer have them. Now, in adolescence, nocturnal erections can culminate in ejaculation, but what I'm just talking about are just erections, and a healthy man has, as I said before, has 3 or more per night, and so what the doctors were expecting. This is the big discovery, and I alluded to it before. The doctors were expecting that as the incidence of erectile dysfunction goes up 10% per decade after age 40, that sex erections will become less firm. That nocturnal erection number will go down. That nocturnal erection firmness will go down. Well, that's true for the 10-12% of men who have angina, heart attack, diabetes, hypertension. But for the vast majority of men, 85% or more, they actually stay just as hard until the late 60s, early 70s. And even then, they still get pretty hard. So why are these men reporting more dysfunction if their heart is still pumping? Well, the reason is they're losing blood from their penis faster, and they need a ring. And they also need to sort out why it's happening. It could be the partner, it could be alcohol, etc.
And smoking's a big factor, of course.
Smoking's a problem. Yep.
It's also a really big factor for fertility of the sperm, how potent your sperm can be if you're trying to get pregnant with someone. Women always get the really big finger wafted at them, it's up to you to take responsibility for your fertility. But actually, we don't really speak about it as much, that, the potency of men's sperm actually lies in what their lifestyle is like.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, we know that the quantity of sperm, not just the testosterone levels, but the quantity and quality of sperm being produced by men now is a fraction of what it was in the 1970s. And we don't know why. People actually smoke less today than they did in the past. They drink less today than they did in the past overall. And people want to attribute to plastics in our diet, and it could well be that.
I wonder if it's like a fitness and like weight thing as well, because that's the only like thing I can.
Great point. Because men who are obese, one, they produce less testosterone. Plus, they produce more estrogen and estradiol they convert the testosterone to estrogen more than men who are not obese. And men are certainly fatter today, and it's appalling sometimes. If I go to New York City or London, even Paris today, it's really appalling to see how poorly fit men and women are, as opposed to my youth.
Yeah, I mean, we all have these kind of issues and stuff, and we all gain weight and lose weight in life. It's just one of those ebbs and flows. But I do wonder if we paid more attention across the board, not just that, ED problems, but sexual health, enhancing sexual experiences and fertility. If we actually focus more on this subject macroly, actually, if you look at systems like the NHS in the UK, which I'm sure you know what it is, it's a free health service.
Sure.
How much time and money would we free up by preventing problems and focusing on things like your technology and stopping things from getting to a later stage and pouring money into later stage issues rather than preventative?
That's a great point. Let me just cite 3 facts about sex that should have an impact on not just on people, but on our governments. Okay. So we know that in women, and it's probably true in men as well too, women who have an orgasm every day decrease the cortisol levels by up to 50%. That's the stress hormone. We know that this big study out of the UK that men over the age of 70 who have sex 3 times a week versus less than 2 times per month cut their risk of sudden cardiac death by 50%. They're going to die anyway, but that's an enormous number. And we know studies in the United States, and I'm sure it's true in the UK and Australia, we know that couples that have sex 3 times a week versus less than 3 times a month have half the divorce or separation rate. And we know the impact everywhere of divorce upon the health of the children, where the children graduate high school, the income of the children, where the children do drugs or alcohol. All of our governments are intent on keeping the family unit together. What are the odds that tomorrow Starmer or Trump or Macron or any of these characters are going to come out and say, here's something that you can do to decrease the health budget and preserve the overall health of our country. Have sex every day.
Oh, well, sometimes we can be a bit funny in this country, but I remember when COVID was happening, some of the newspapers released, I think it's like certified like NHS like positions to have sex in to avoid getting COVID, and one of them was doggy. So
yeah,
but you are right, it's an important part of a relationship. It shouldn't be like the deciding factor, but it is a part. And I feel like a lot of people, whether it's because religion or just expectations, they kind of just think, oh, well, we've had our children and we can stop that because this is our priority now. I've not had kids, so I don't really get the most important opinion here. But in terms of when it is about sex and a couple staying together, right, there's 2 people in the relationship. And that means that if one person doesn't show up, then of course the relationship's going to go downhill, because when it takes in a relationship of both people having sex, it needs 2 people. And I can't help but feel a really popular trend with people who are maybe separating because it's a sex-based variant is because they're not having that conversation. One's checked out and the other one is still wanting to be there,
People in relationships need to plan for pleasure. And I don't just mean like a date night twice a month where they drink too much and they end up complaining about each other because they drink too much as opposed to making love. So I think people, if people, again, let's get back to this idea of erectile fitness or sexual fitness. How do we approach fitness in the rest of our life? Well, you don't just like decide one day, I'm going to go to the gym and I know what I'm going to do. I'll be spontaneous. I don't know, no, I have no plan. No, people go to the gym and they've got a plan in their phone, or they've got a whiteboard, or they're going to work out with a trainer, or they're going to go to a class. Now, I'm not suggesting that people should have a whiteboard in their bedroom, although that might be a nice idea once in a while. But rather that people need to commit to sexual health with their partners, and that means overcoming some of the resistance. I'm tired. I had a long day with the kids, or people need to not stop making make less excuses and commit to to engaging with a partner sexually for the health of the relationship and for their overall health and for their children, etc.
But I feel that would take health services really growing out those spaces, especially here in the UK with the NHS. But the problem is we already are on our knees and we don't have enough funding to invest that into that part of life. Like, for example, you said we should treat it like a fitness. We have a guideline that you should be doing 150 minutes of moderate exercise, I think, in the UK a week, right? Just as a baseline. But I really don't see the British government or who governs the NHS, being the frigid Brits we are, ever putting importance on that. I feel like it's something deeper than looking at health. It's looking at culture, religion. Why do we carry so much shame around speaking about sex and its importance, And then also, like, if we did bring in a quota, which was, we have to do 150 minutes of sexual activity a week, that brings a certain level of people wanting entitlement to that. So as I said, it's a hard thing to balance.
Well, in China they have a social credit score. Imagine having a sexual credit score. Okay, okay, Elliot. You're 20 minutes behind this week. You need to catch up next week, or you're going to be punished. You can't do this, that, or the other. Or Heidi, way to go, Heidi. You have exceeded by 30 minutes. This week. Here's your reward. It's. I would like to, I would like to see our governments be more positive about promoting sexual health. I've actually spoken to 3 commissioners of health, including and 2 governors in the United States about, hey, look, this is something that doesn't cost the government any money, and would benefit overall health spending if you would get people to recognize that that regular sex is going to be good for their health, their heart, and for their relationships.
Well, good luck doing that with your government. Good luck. I wish you the best in doing that. But then again, like, you look at kind of how we look at sex culturally. Donald Trump, your president, it's almost when he came into power, he took over this kind of Republican conservative narrative, even though that's never who he really was before he got into politics, right? But right now there's kind of this conservative renaissance happening in America, and you're seeing it with Roe v. Wade and all of that kind of jazz. As I said, it's really hard to get these conversations in there, especially when the culture's moving in the way it is.
Actually, there's a misunderstanding here. Roe v. Wade, by the way, I think we happen to have a constitution in the country that basically says a decision like Roe v. Wade can't be made that way. Either Congress, and then Democrats never voted for this. Either Congress needs to make this something that's national, or it's reserved to the states. And Roe v. Wade just restored that to the states. But actually, the Christian movement in the United States is actually very sex positive because they see it as strengthening the family. I don't. So they're negative about infidelity, really negative. And I'm certain they're not going to be promoting 69. but they're very positive. But they're very sex positive because they see it as overall as something that's family positive.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not an American. I only see what I see, and obviously, being like in a liberal country, we're going to get the saturations of the negative side. But there still are women moving to different states because they can't get abortion access, right? And it puts them in a more vulnerable position. But the kind of conservative movement we see online is like one of modesty and conserving and stuff. So maybe that's because I'm not literally in America and I can't see it myself. I'm willing to say that with some humility.
Yeah, no, it's that. No, that's a very interesting phenomenon because we just, I don't think look, this is a huge country with many subcultures, and most people
Yeah.
just they go to LA, or they go to New York City, or they go to Epcot, or they go to Florida, Disneyland, or Epcot, and they don't really know about America. I mean, I live in Montana. People, when I travel overseas, people think Montana is like the TV show Yellowstone, and then we have militias here. And I mean, more people die in one episode of Yellowstone than die in 5 years in Montana. And so it's, I understand the point you're making, but there's more to sex than abortion rights. So whereas the conservatives are conservative about abortion rights, that's different than what we're talking about here, which is sexual fitness, sexual health.
Yeah. It does all work as one, though, in terms of, having the space to speak about it.
Okay.
I remember, take any usual grandparent, and try and speak to them about a cock ring. It's just not happening.
That's not going to happen anywhere. But in the United States, could you guess what state or what region has the most sex per regular sex?
Has the most what? Sorry?
Has most sex and buys the most sex toys per capita.
I would feel inclined to say something like LA because of the wellness culture, but I'm going to guess
it's Wyoming.
I
Well,
was going to say it's not LA.
Yeah,
it's going to be something in the middle.
Yeah, and it's the most sex per capita is in Indiana, and the most sex toys per person is Wyoming. So but most people in Europe have never heard of Indiana, let alone Wyoming.
Well, I would say obviously Middle America or somewhere in there, because their assumption is that there's not as much going on there, so maybe you have more time to have sex.
I don't think that's true, but that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like the same in the UK. I reckon the people on the farms and in the countryside have a lot more sex than city folk, I reckon. In terms of FirmTech, what's your hopes for the future? Where would you like to stock? What would you like to put into play? What's the plan, Elliot?
Sure. Well, next year we're going to come out with the Clitique, which is the world's first monitor of clitoral health, and that will transform gynecology and sexology for women, because women will then be able to objectively assess their sexual health and the impact of diabetes, hypertension, obesity, atherosclerosis, medications, hormones, antidepressants upon their sexual health, and be able to say, no, I don't want to take that hormone, that pill for anxiety, because it's interfering with my sexual health. And if they're older, they'll be able to say, if I want to enjoy a sex life, I need to lose weight, or I need to deal with my diabetes or my hypertension. I think that's going to be transformational. That's our major goal for next year. We do sell our products in the UK. We have a distributor there, and if people want to get our products, they can go to myfirmtech, myfirmtch.com. If they want to read about the science, just click on the science section. You can see the research that's being done.
Are you with any wholesalers in the UK yet?
We're not with any wholesalers.
Okay. All right.
Tried.
It's coming all in good time.
We'll be in Boots eventually.
Well, I'll have to get my hands on that clitoral one when it comes out. Also, how is that going to work? Like, how would you apply that?
It's a wearable. I mean, here it is. I don't know if you're from the...
Okay. Exclusive. Ah, interesting.
So basically, it inserts behind the pubic bone inside. So there's, here, like this, there's a pressure sensor that measures PCG muscle contractions of arousal and orgasm. But
like on the Mondis.
Right. Down here, we have two sensors that will measure engorgement of the bulbs of the clitoris, not the glands, the visible part, but the bulbs that sit behind the labia. And by measuring the blood flow and the temperature and the cardiac rhythm, we can then objectively assess the health of the clitoris. Okay,
well, I'll have to have you on next year when this is out and cooking.
I look forward to it, and I'll hope to see you sometime in London for a cocktail.
Yeah. Let me know. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Elliot. Where can people find you?
You can find me personally at Elliot, ELLIOT, at myfirmtech, myfirmtch.com. And I look forward to hearing from you.
We'll put all of your links in the bio. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Heidi. That was fun.
If you found this episode interesting or enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button down here. It helps me out more than you know. I'm an independent production. Or check out one of our past episodes here. There's one here, there's one here. That's what I'm imagining.